I started wondering when I was reconstructing my religion, what do I want out of God? And what does God want out of me? When was the last time you asked that question? What do you want out of God? Or higher power, universe? Again, fill in the word appropriate to whatever makes you feel less cringy. What do you want out of God? And what do you think God wants out of you? When was the last time you asked that question? Have you ever asked that question? Have you ever been really honest with yourself and written down the answers? Do it. Send it to us.
Welcome to the Derelict Podcast. For the disparaged, depleted, and delinquent souls trying to find our way, we're talking about the scary part of the journey, where we don't know how it'll end. Let's be free to face our fucking failures in real time as the most unadulterated, truest version of who we are. No sugarcoating. Welcome to the shit show, you derelict.
Hello. Welcome to the Derelict Podcast. I'm Josh. I'm your host. I'll be guiding you through a journey today of self-definition, self-regulation, self-discovery, self-improvement, self-involvement, self-actualization. By the end of this episode, you will be a perfect human being. You'll have no more problems. You'll have no more failures. And just 100% pure success. Welcome. No, this is not that kind of podcast. If that's what you're here for, go listen to Joel Osteen or some other fucking religious quack. That's not what we're talking about today. Yes, I just said that. If you have a problem with that, send me a fucking message and be like, oh, Joel Osteen is the best and here's the reason why. Yeah, whatever. It's fucking bullshit. Here's the reason why. What are we talking about today? Well, we're talking about religion again, because the first two episodes weren't enough. Welcome to the Derelict Podcast. The Derelict Podcast is about all the things that you just heard in the introduction. It's for disparaged. It's for derelicts. Derelict is something that's been abandoned, been destroyed. A vessel, a ship. In nautical terms, it refers to a ship that's been abandoned. Just goodbye. If you've ever seen any of those abandoned ships, either in person or online, they're pretty amazing sights. Why are they amazing? Are they amazing because they're all put together? No. They're amazing because of the fact that they're a mess. And people love to see a good mess. So, guess what? I'm a good mess. You're a good mess. We're derelicts together. So what's the point of this podcast? The point of this podcast is not to say, here's my 3-step formula for how you're going to have success in your life. It's not going to be success and nothing less. It's not going to be, we're on fire because we're so fucking brilliant together, like all of the other goddamn stupid podcasts out there. This is the anti-podcast because we're not going to talk about any of that shit. We're going to get real. Okay? You want to get real with me? Let's get vulnerable. Let's be open. Let's be honest. That's why we're talking about religion today. It's why it's taken me so many episodes already to even broach this subject, because it's a difficult one for me. I have a lot of baggage and trauma and childhood shit that I've had to deal with just thinking about what to talk about on this episode. Is that you? I'm assuming you have some childhood shit when it comes to religion, otherwise you wouldn't be here. I don't think if you're perfectly good with everything about your religious traditions and you're still in it and nothing's changed, that you're going to be here, honestly. If you are, welcome, but I don't know, you might not like this podcast, and that's okay. There's ones for you. I'm sure Joel Osteen has one. God, I'm going to get sued by Joel Osteen by saying Joel Osteen's name so many times. All right, so what's the point? What are we talking about today? This is part 3. Religion 1, 2, 3. Don't know if third time's the charm, but we'll see. First one, how I failed religion as a kid. Second one, how I failed religion as a young man. Now we're going to talk about how I failed religion more recently, post-divorce. So why is post-divorce important? Why did I name it how I failed at religion post-divorce versus how I failed religion as a middle-aged man or a man? Here's the reason why. I think that different things that we go through in our life, you could call them traumatic events, or you could call them adjustments or changes, whatever you want to call them, really test our beliefs. Let me start with a quote. C.S. Lewis, A Grief Observed. Great book, by the way. If you ever go through any sort of grief, read that book. It's amazing. It's just C.S. Lewis just giving his thoughts when his wife died. And it's just brilliant and vulnerable and powerful and awesome. Here's what he says. Only a real risk tests the reality of a belief. So my risk of my marriage going away, which I thought would never go away, which I was firmly believing, convinced that would last forever. I really believed till death do us part. And it was over. Not my choice, but it was over. Really tested what I believed as far as religion goes. I started thinking, well, religion isn't my childhood anymore. Religion also isn't my marriage or my young family anymore. Now it's just me. I think it was the first time in my life where I had to figure out what religion meant to just me, no one else, because I was by myself, really for the first time in my life. It wasn't parents, it wasn't friends, it wasn't siblings, it wasn't a wife. It's just me. So, just like I did in the first 2 episodes. By the way, if you haven't listened to the first 2 episodes, maybe start there. This is a bit of a progression, and we're going to talk a little bit about what we talked about in the previous episodes. You don't have to. Welcome either way, but I think it might be worth going back and listening to first. But if you don't want to, that's fine. I'm going to give you the same disclaimer as I did in the first 2 episodes. I am not against religion. Am I a religious person? Most people would probably say no at this point in my life. But am I against religion? No. This is just my story, or at least a part of it. Just like the first 2 episodes were my story, or at least a part of it. I don't believe in banishing religion. I don't believe in bashing religion. I'm definitely on a journey trying to figure out what that means for me. I think that religion can be used very inappropriately. I also think it can do a tremendous amount of good. Many movements and many amazing things have happened in the name of religion. So I'm not against religion. I'm here as a derelict talking about how I failed at religion. So let's start with that. Lately, this is not just post-divorce several years ago. This is right now as I'm recording this podcast. I still am having a really hard time connecting with the God of my understanding, my higher power, my God, the universe, whatever you want to call God for your religious tradition. I'm having a hard time with my connection right now. I feel God at this point more through friends and relationships and connections and less structured than I used to. What I found is that as I've been going through this process of trying to figure out what my religion is, it's been much more difficult without set rules and structure. Do any of you relate to this? Have any of you listening to this grown up in a structured religion? And when you have to try to figure out what that religion is for you and the structure isn't there, or at least you get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm going to put the rules and the structure on the side and just see how I do it. There's an element of that that's really hard, for me at least, because with rules and regulations and structure, it's a lot easier for me to know what to do next. Without that, man, I constantly feel like I'm failing or flailing. Like, what do I even have a relationship with God? What is that even like? What is prayer? What is meditation? What is reading religious texts? It's more beautiful and more difficult than any time I've ever experienced with religion. The world is my oyster, and sometimes when the whole world is your oyster, you don't know where to go. It's the analogy of, well, if you live on a farm or you've ever been on a farm, do you know one of the main reasons they put fences around animals with whatever context you want to use is to contain the animals within those fences, to give them freedom in the innermost part of the fences. I heard somebody who kept sheep tell me this story before. I am not a shepherd by any stretch of the imagination, but I heard somebody tell me this, or a keeper of sheep or whatever the hell they're called. But what they told me is they said, look, if you just have sheep in an open field with no boundaries, they don't know where to fucking go. They don't know what to do, etc. if you put them in too small of a closed space, they freak out and they want to get out. That's why you kind of have to pick this. You need boundaries, you need a fence, you need rules, you need some regulations, but you need freedom within that. And that really related to me a lot when it comes to religion. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. But that is a hard place to be. I'd much rather have more structure and just somebody tell me what to do. But then whose religion am I following? It's somebody else's. It sure as hell ain't mine. So before we talked about different church experiences, different religious experiences, evangelism being key, community being key, tribe being key, the city being key, etc. Today, we're going to talk about at least my experience with how religion changes when it's tested. So I think the way that I want to start this podcast episode is by talking about something I haven't talked about yet, and that is in the religious context and traditions and structure that I grew up with, that hopefully you heard about in the last 2 episodes, but at least that I spoke about in the last 2 episodes. In all of those religious traditions, they did have a few similarities. One of them was marriage. And what they all believed in marriage was that when you were married, you were joined together. It was 2 people joining as one entity, let's say. And that entity should never be broken. So most of the religious traditions I came from did not believe in divorce, no matter what the context. Doesn't matter if there was abuse. Doesn't matter if there was adultery. You are committed to this person no matter what, as long as you can work it out. Now, most of those traditions would also say, but at the same time, if you're getting beat every single night, you should probably leave. So maybe there were some caveats in really extreme adultery or, abusive situations. But for the most part, it was once you get married, you stay married. That's how I grew up in my household. That's how I grew up in the religious context. So that was tied very much to my religion. Have any of you ever experienced that? Or maybe you still experience that, where it's almost as if your marriage and your religion are like this. They're tied together. And I didn't realize how tied together they were until my divorce and they separated. So I was having a crisis of religion or a crisis of faith at this point. So let's back up a little bit. What church was I going to? What was the type of church? So if you recall from last episode, where we ended was the infamous Mars Hill and Mark Driscoll debacle, the church shutting down, me feeling left out in the cold, because finally the one church that I thought really understood me failed me, failed a lot of people. And we moved at the same time, so we decided, okay, we're going to start at a church local. And this church was all about community and family. Now, at this point, we were just starting to have children. We moved into a new community. It wasn't that far away, half hour away, but still a new community, trying to meet people, trying to figure out how to be parents. So, shocker, we pick a church where community and family are key. Their kind of thoughts on knowledge and religion in the Bible was like, yeah, we believe in it, but as long as it isn't too extreme or like really offend you, as long as it keeps our church growing and is steady and consistent and financially healthy, etc., then it's okay. Heavily influenced by the community, heavily influenced by the people that were attending it, which I think is true of everywhere, but this one's especially. So here's my question. Is that healthy? When you think of your religious experience, is it healthy that it's influenced dramatically by your community, or do you think that there are unhealthy elements of that? And at what point is it healthy to be influenced by the community because it's trying to meet the needs of the community? And what point does it become unhealthy because it then just becomes, eventually it could become a cult, right? Where it's so heavily influenced by the community or by a leader that forget about reality or things that are important or the bigger whole. It's just about this small community with these families. Had a lot of really beautiful, good-hearted people, but also we're scared of controversy, and we're weak. Kind of a typical suburban, let's all get together and have basic, generic beliefs and be a part of a community together. Again, I'm not dogging this church, but when community and family are key, it's hard to deal with people that have differing beliefs. Even though I wasn't a part of this church anymore, I saw them have a really difficult time through COVID because these good-hearted, beautiful community people all of a sudden started having different beliefs about the virus or vaccines or anything else, and it just grows apart. Just like with my divorce, like they agreed with the Bible that divorce is not right and that you're not supposed to get divorced, etc. But they weren't willing to do anything about it. They weren't willing to talk to us and actually have honest conversations. And that's what I found, that's what I found that I want in religion. I want a religion that is supportive. I want a religion that is supportive not only in a supporting way, but also in a confrontational way. For me, part of support is also confronting in a healthy way. Like if I'm being a total asshole, I don't believe you're really a good friend of mine unless you're willing to present that information to me and to tell me why and to ask me to make an amends or an apology or a reformation or repent or whatever word you want to use. Did I say reformation? I meant reparation. Hopefully that came through correctly. Whatever word you want to use, basically asking me to change course. Because if you're not willing to ask me to change course, I'm probably not willing to ask you to change course. And then why are we friends? Are we trying to make each other better? So this church, I really struggled with that. And it's not going to make any surprises here that when I went through my divorce, the church was just kind of silent on it. Like they had their beliefs and they kind of talked about it, but they weren't willing to do anything about it because they're not really willing to do anything about anything. Because at the end of the day, from my experience, a lot of religion and churches, it's about business. It's about keeping the doors open. It's about keeping the majority of people happy. So if you don't fit into that and you're kind of an outcast, you're a derelict, you're like, oh, well, this whole church is about marriage and family and everything else, and now you're divorced. Well, we don't really have a place for you. Who is listening to this episode right now that is divorced or getting divorced that don't feel sometimes like there's a place for them? Even with all the divorces that happen worldwide and especially in this country, more than half of divorces from all the stats I see, more than half of marriages from all the stats I see end in divorce. That's a really big number. Yet my kids know very few of their friends are from divorced households. Very few, which I just can't relate. It's probably because they go to a really good school. There seems to be a correlation there. I don't know. But when you are part of a church that heavily believes in community, kids, marriage, and you go through a divorce, they don't know what the fuck to do with you. They don't know what to do with the ugliness of spouse or friends or family or community. And it really hurts. There was plenty of good people there. There's an amazing pastor there that walked through this part of my journey with me that I might have on this podcast eventually because I respect him and love him so very much, even though he was a part of this really traumatic, hurtful time for me. And I think that's another key that I just want to bring up right now, is that all the ugliness that religion brings, it also brings beauty. And all the people that use it to their advantage for self-centered, narcissistic, evil ways, there are just as many people that use it for good. And frankly, it's, here, I wrote down this quote that I wanted to read as well, also from C.S. Lewis in A Grief Observed. He said, "Talk to me about the trust of religion, and I'll listen gladly. Talk to me about the duty of religion, and I'll listen submissively. But don't come to me talking about the consolations of religion, or I shall suspect that you don't understand." And that's how I felt at this church. I just wanted somebody to be there for me, to console me. I wanted this religion and this truth that I grew up with to comfort me, console me, help me during this really difficult time in my life. And it just didn't. It just didn't. It just didn't do what I wanted it to do. And that started having me question, well, why do I believe what I believe? Let me ask you this. When was the last time you tested your beliefs? Are you in the same religious tradition that you were when you were growing up? Are you in a different one? Are you not in one at all? And you were in one when you grew up. Were you not one when you grew up and now you are in one? I don't know what's different, but when was the last time you tested it? When was the last time you actually thought about, here are the different things that I believe in my religion, whatever that is, and here's how they actually impact my life? This is not a religious podcast by any stretch of the imagination, as you can tell. And even the religious episodes have plenty of swearing and everything else that, a lot of religious people would be offended by. However, religion is a part of life. We all have religions. Science could be your religion. Atheism could be your religion. You all have a religion. Don't pretend like you don't. And my question to you is, when was the last time you tested your beliefs in that religion and how they're working for you? Where do they come from? How much of your response now to your religion is just based on past trauma, past hurt? Because I know for me, that's when I was, quote, tested. Another question, do you believe God or your higher power or Allah or the universe or whatever tests you? Do you believe you're tested? How do we find inner knowledge, to use a term? Is that through meditation or prayer or knowledge? I don't know. Think about that for a second. We're going to break for an ad. We'll be right back. This fake ad is being sponsored by Eckhart Tolle and his book, Stillness Speaks. In it, he said, "In you, as in each human being, there is a dimension of consciousness far deeper than thought. It is the very essence of who you are. We may call it presence, awareness, the unconditioned consciousness. In the ancient teachings, it is the Christ within, or your Buddha nature." Eckhart Tolle, Stillness Speaks, available now in the resources underneath the notes of this episode. Now back to the show. All right, and we're back. So right before the break, I asked, how does one find inner knowledge? Can religion exist with just inner knowledge? That's a tough question. Don't think we're going to get to that one. Well, for me, what ended up happening next is I was pretty fed up with church at this point. I felt like church failed me many times. I felt like religion failed me many times. It failed me in the sense of trying to become a stronger man. When that church failed, it failed me in the context of trying to be more city and community and tribe-centric. When that church failed, it failed me when my marriage failed and the church continued on and lost most of my community, my friends, etc., for not a good reason. Let's put it that way, without dragging anybody through the mud on this podcast. So, where did that leave me? Well, that left me in a very confused, unsure spot. So I like to hike. I don't know if there's any hikers out there, but I like to hike. And one of the things about hiking is that when you're walking up a trail, to make sure that you have sure footing, you always have to keep an eye out for rocks. Rocks move, they make you fall. Not a good scene. I would say a good amount of the time I spend hiking is looking for rocks and making sure I have a sure footing, because that's really the only thing that really matters when you're hiking, is just make sure you have a sure footing and take breaks when you need, drink water, basic stuff. I felt like my footing was taken out from underneath me. You ever been there? Has religion ever failed you? If you're listening to this podcast, I bet 100% of the answers are yes, because religion is man-made and it fails people all the time. So, where did I decide to go? I was a part of this church that I felt like failed me, didn't have my back, going through the most traumatic experience of my life, my divorce at that time. So I went down this popular process that has become really popular the last several years of, quote, deconstruction. Have you heard of it? One of my first introductions to this is by a man named Richard Rohr. I would heavily recommend that you read some of his books. Everything Belongs was the first book I read by him. Huge fan of that book. I think it's really great. I think you could read it several times and get a lot out of it. So what I did is I read the entire book through, and then I found a book study that was going through it, and then we read it together and talked about every chapter every week. This was a book club of individuals that also grew up in religious traditions similar to mine. So we had a lot of really good conversations around this book. Would recommend it. Again, it's in the resources. Just click the link below to buy it from Amazon. But the basic principle that I found from deconstruction that was helpful for me is that I was really upset with the status quo. I was upset with the box that religion kept putting me in. I was upset with my experience at church, and I was upset that I felt like it all failed me. I was tired of trying to reform it. I was tired of trying to change it. I was tired of the fact that no one seemed to get the fuck what I was going through. I couldn't find a community, a tribe, people that understood me because I was a massive... You have to see the video to understand what I just said. If you're listening, you're missing out. I'm drinking from my coffee mug and it says cunt. There you go. Now you know. So that being said, I was really just at a point where I wanted to focus on myself. You ever been there? You ever been at a point where you're just like, oh man, I'm fucking tired. I'm so tired of trying to change everything or fight everything. I just want to focus on myself for a while and just figure out where I fall. That's where I was. Another quote that I wrote down here that I resonate with a lot, and it's not from a religious teacher. It's actually from Tony Robbins, which if you've listened to any of my episodes, you know that I'm a fan of. He said, nothing in the universe ever gets destroyed. It just changes and transforms. And he said that at a conference I was at, and it really stuck with me because that's how I felt at this time in my life. I felt, look, this isn't a change. This is just transformation. I have to deconstruct before I can reconstruct. So I went down this process of deconstructing my faith, trying to figure out what do I actually believe and why do I believe it? Again, another quote from C.S. Lewis from A Grief Observed says, only a real risk tests the reality of a belief. So I was finally at a point in my life where I decided that I must figure this shit out for myself. Richard Rohr in his book says, if you had the gift forever, you would fall in love with the gift instead of the giver of the gift. So the giver has to take it away every once in a while and make sure you still love the giver. This is where I was at. My God, so to speak, was my marriage. My marriage had failed. Done. Now that it was taken away from me, I had to decide, do I still believe in God? Even though I feel like God failed me, my marriage ended, etc. So what did I do? I deconstructed. I started thinking about, what do I believe? Why do I believe it? And how has the context of how I grew up changed that? So again, I ask you listeners, please, for the love of God, or whatever your God is, when was the last time you thought about your beliefs and where they come from and why you have them? I would encourage you greatly today to spend some time, maybe even pause the episode right now and spend some time just writing down what you believe and be curious about where it came from. Because until we really can start resonating with that, can we change? Or can we decide this is how I'm going to do something that is more in line with what I really believe and what my morals really are, and really what I want to do for the world? Like, this has become, this group, this movement, the Derelict movement, the Derelict podcast, along with other groups I've been a part of, have become more my religion, frankly, because I can follow a religion much more that's about honesty, authenticity, vulnerability, and a tribe of people that are willing to face that shit real time. I don't know about you, But I never really experienced that in a church or religious setting. Have you? Do you go to church or your temple or mosque or whatever and experience people that are really deep and impactful and authentic and genuine and vulnerable with each other? Man, there's so many masks from what I've seen. And again, I'm not throwing out religion. I just think it's really hard to figure out how to unloosen the masks and be yourself there. How can you be naked in church? It doesn't work. So I had to deconstruct my religion, try to figure out what do I really believe and why do I believe it. Still in the process of doing this. But you know, one thing that I really don't like about the deconstruction movement, especially among Christians that went through it, is it was a lot of, what I felt is it was a lot of Christians' excuse just to be like, yeah, fuck the trauma that I had as a kid growing up with religion. Fuck it all. I'm an atheist now and just everything is wrong about religion. Okay, that seems a little extreme. It's kind of like the guy, pointing at myself, it's kind of like the guy that gets divorced that says, fuck that, I'm never getting married again. Now, I kind of am that guy. I don't think I'm going to get married again, but it's not because of that bad experience of a divorce, or maybe it is and I'm lying to myself. I don't know. But I have to be honest about that to try to figure out, is that why? Just like with religion, am I kind of anti-church or religion right now because I had a bad experience? Or because it's transformed? So for me, deconstruction had to be followed up by reconstruction. So where do you turn when you're restructuring your religion, your faith, your God, your higher power? Where do you go? The thing that helped me do it, honestly, was 12-step. It's not for everybody. It has a very specific connotation for most people that think of alcohol and drugs. There's a 12-step for everything. I think 12-step, the reason it has resonated with me so much is that it has to do with universal principles. And here's what they are, basically. You can't, something greater can, give your shit up and apologize and spread the news. Isn't that basically every religion? I mean, it's Christianity. You can't do it. God can do it. Allow God to do it. Admit all your shit. Ask for forgiveness. Repent. Evangelize. I mean, that's basically Christianity. That's basically 12-step. It's basically every other religion I've ever heard of. So why did that become my religion? Because it was an open space, a vulnerable space, a non-judging space, a space where people could come and say whatever the fuck they wanted and they didn't get kicked out of the group. They were able to be themselves. It was what I always wanted church to be, because things didn't have to fit in this box like they did in all the religious traditions that I grew up in. Now, even though I think the 12-step principles are universal, 12-step is not universal. The majority of the people listening to this episode do not attend a 12-step group. That's just based on statistics. Why? Well, partly I think it's because people think of it as you have to have drugs or alcohol problem to be a part of it, which is not why I was a part of it, by the way. I think that's part of it. I think the other part of it is it's still a fucking box. The reason I'm so passionate about this podcast and this movement of fellow derelicts is that there's no box. The only box that exists here is you got to admit that you can't figure this shit out by yourself. And you want a space that's open and vulnerable and authentic and real. And you're tired of all the bullshit success stories. You're tired of all the bullshit social media. You're just fucking tired of it. And you just want somewhere where you belong. And that's how I feel. I started wondering when I was reconstructing my religion, what do I want out of God? And what does God want out of me? When was the last time you asked that question? What do you want out of God? Or higher power, universe? Again, fill in the word appropriate to whatever makes you feel less cringy. What do you want out of God? And what do you think God wants out of you? When was the last time you asked that question? Have you ever asked that question? Have you ever been really honest with yourself and written down the answers? Do it. send it to us. In the show notes, as always, there's a place to email us. I will respond to you directly. I would love to hear your answer. And frankly, people that have really good answers and send them to me, I want to have you on the podcast. I would love to hear it real time. Let's spend more time talking about it. I think that's fantastic. So where has that put me now? Well, Richard Rohr also says the spiritual journey has much more to do with subtraction than addiction. Excuse me, addition. That was a Freudian slip after talking about 12-step. Let's try that again. The spiritual journey has much more to do with subtraction than addition. Interesting. Even though I would say that I am at a point in my life that I'm trying to be more expansive about God and my beliefs and what I want from God and God wants from me and all that sort of stuff. I think there's a lot of truth to this because I have to figure out the stuff in my life that might be baggage or otherwise in the religious context. What's holding me back? How do I subtract that stuff to get to the real core of what I believe? How do I subtract that stuff? How do I continue to have a spirituality without religion? Or how do I have religion without a church? Or how do I, so on. Good question. So I don't know if I have an answer for you today because I don't think I have an answer for myself. I appreciate you listening to how I failed at religion post-divorce because I think it is the trauma or the difficulties or the transitions or the changes, et cetera, that we go through with our life that really, again, like some of these quotes said, really test our beliefs. And for me, it's not about religion at all. It's about my beliefs. And it's about how I view God, how I view my higher power, how do I reconstruct this together? So I'm still in the process of reconstructing my religion, my faith, my God. I'm still trying to figure out how to do that. I'm very open to a lot of, I don't know what to say, present practices, meditative practices, Buddhist practices, Christian practices. I'm just open to a lot of things right now. And that might offend or turn off a lot of people listening to this episode, and that's okay. Tell me what works for you, will you? What I would love to hear from you is I would love for you to shoot me a note. Even, by the way, even if we're friends, even if we talk all the time, whoever is listening to this, please, here's my request. Shoot me a note or leave a comment down below and just tell me what has been helpful to you when reconstructing your religion, when reconstructing your faith, when reconstructing your belief in God. Because frankly, as I told you at the beginning of this episode, I'm struggling with it right now. And because I'm struggling with it, I'm struggling how to do that with my kids as well. We talked about a lot of good things. If you didn't listen to that podcast episode about religion and kids, go back and listen to it. I think there's some really good gems in there. But that stuff I'm still trying to figure out because I still don't even know how to do it myself. So how can I do it with my kids if I don't know how to do it myself? But you know what? Here's the good news. Here's what I found. One of the beauties about parenting is that my kids are figuring stuff out and learning stuff the same time I'm figuring out stuff and learning stuff. So I think it's apropos that this podcast episode would not end with me telling you I figured it out, because I haven't. I'm on a spiritual journey, man. I'm sure you are too. Isn't it fun though? Are you having fun on your journey? Because if you're not, here's what I'd ask you to do and reconsider. Reconsider how you could have fun figuring this stuff out. It doesn't all have to be stressful and, oh shit, the world's going to end and my life's going to end and everything's going to be terrible if I can't figure this stuff out. It doesn't have to be that way. You could have fun on this journey. Have fun on this journey. Join us. Be a derelict. Be somebody who hasn't figured it out, but is willing to be open and vulnerable and honest. What would religion look like in this world if it was full of open, honest, vulnerable, authentic, trustworthy individuals. Whatever religion that was is the religion I would follow. That's the one I would have in my life. Who knows? Maybe maybe Derelicts is going to become a new religion. Just kidding. I'm not a cult leader. There's plenty of those. Watch many of the documentaries made about cult leaders. So all that being said, I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with you as always. I really hope you liked what you heard. And again, if you did, will you do me a personal favor? Shoot me a note. Rate the episode, rate the podcast, review it. These things help because the more we do this, the more people get to be joined to this tribe. And this is not just about a crazy derelict middle-aged white dude doing a podcast in his basement podcast studio, even though that's what's happening right now. But that's not what it's about. It's about growing a tribe of people that are real and authentic and vulnerable and honest and here for each other. So I want that from you. I want that from us. Let's do this together. Let's figure out this religion thing together. All right, so stay tuned. Future episodes, we are going to talk about a little bit more details of what we went through before. I'm going to bring on some guests that went through similar experiences to me, maybe even of the same churches. We're definitely going to readdress some of the churches we talked about. I only named one by name, but that one's most for sure going to come back up at some point. So stay tuned. I'd love and am so interested in hearing their feedback and their experience going through the same but different experience than me, because we all experience things a little differently. So again, please, I ask of you, of the kindness of your heart, review us, rate us, send us a comment, but more importantly, let us know how we can serve you. Let us know how we can help you. Let us know how we can be a support to you. Let us know what we can do in this podcast to really make your life better and make this a more authentic experience for you, as opposed to all that other bullshit out there. Let's just tune out the noise and focus right here. Thank you so much. Thank you for being a part of this. Check out the show notes for the resources we talked about. And as always, until next time, see you later, you fucking derelict.